This is the IBJ podcast for the week of January 29th, 2024, brought to you by Taft. I'm your host, Mason King. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. You probably can tell that I am recording this outside. There is a ton of renovation work going on inside my home, so this is about as quiet as it's going to get. Luckily, our theme today is kind of along the lines of reclamation. The concept behind the local not-for-profit group RecycleForce can be stated in a very elegant maxim: we're recycling electronics and recycling lives. Now, when you get into the nitty-gritty details, RecycleForce is not nearly as refined, but accepting things that are rough around the edges is integral to its mission. Entrepreneur Gregg Keesling hit on this set of solutions to two persistent problems in the early 2000s. Give people who have just been released from jail or prison a much-needed opportunity for temporary employment by training and hiring them to salvage recyclable materials from electronic waste. The ex-offenders also receive comprehensive services designed to get their lives back on track, including job skills, personal counseling, professional mentoring, literacy training, and connections to full-time permanent jobs. RecycleForce has employed thousands of formerly incarcerated individuals since 2004 and recycled about 10 million pounds of waste. But there's so much more to this story. Keesling grew up about an hour outside of Indianapolis, and one of the major themes of his life has been transformations. Beginning at 16, he played a minor role in the drug trade, procuring marijuana with his friends, and regularly driving his family's station wagon to Florida to pick up pounds of pot to transport back to Indiana for people who would pay a delivery fee. He moved to Jamaica after dropping out of college for its easy access to pot, but he ended up becoming a straight-laced businessman who developed a vacation resort and joined the Rotary Club. In this week's edition of the IBJ podcast, Keesling discusses how RecycleForce's new headquarters in Indianapolis will help it do more with the recyclable materials and the people it trains. But he also talks at length about his own story and how he has learned the importance of giving people a chance to change and succeed. Here's our conversation. It's my pleasure to welcome to the podcast Gregg Keesling, founder and president of RecycleForce. Gregg, thank you for making time to come into the studio today.
Well, thank you, Mason, for inviting me. I really appreciate you reaching out to me.
Now, I've explained in the introduction to the podcast basically what RecycleForce does, but I'm curious to know, when you explain this, RecycleForce, to potential users, people who may not have heard of it, is there like a question that you typically get?
How I would explain it, we recycle the things society throws away. Our old electronics, our hair dryers, and the people we throw away, who we put in prison and forget about. But the question I get often, are you afraid? And it's like, no, right? I hand out, 194 paychecks every week. And I hear guys on the floor, man, if we mess with him, payroll's going to be delayed. So no, I think you're more at risk, sitting here of something happening, certainly not greater than I am. I actually think I'm less. And so that's the question I'll often get.
So it's related to the safety of the workplace, essentially.
Correct. They think, you're going to be shot or hurt or, so that's, I think, the thing that people have about people who've gone to prison and who come home. They're dangerous and terrible, and there are dangerous and terrible people. I'm not against prison, only that when a person does their time and they come home, we just have to see them as a human being, and we have to not be afraid of them. And we have to have common sense. I mean, I'm not going to, if you just came home from prison, Mason, I wouldn't bring you to my house, and this is my safe, right? So it was just sort of common sense things we do, but to have this fear that's exaggerated is just wrong. And that's the question I get the most.
When you are explaining the program to potential employees, formerly incarcerated people, what is their question? What are they most interested in?
Am I going to get violated and sent back to prison? 70%, we're better today in Marion County, But historically, in my almost 20 odd years of doing this work, 7 out of 10 people who went back to prison in the state, and really the whole country, we're not unusual, did not commit a new crime. They had a technical rule violation of their parole, probation, community correction. And often it's because they could not get a job. Remember, you're ordered when you come home to pay, especially on probation and community correction, fines and fees. So an ankle bracelet costs $14 a day. In the old days, if you didn't pay that, you'd go back to jail. So we would always see people struggling. Okay, I got to decide, am I going to buy food or pay this person? And so that's the thing. The number one thing, people are in fear. If I take this, when you have a real job too, they come at you a little harder. They used to. Things are so much better. I mean, I really want to come out that what has happened in the last, 3-4 years in Marion County is phenomenal. We have changed how we're looking at this population. It's healthy and it's good. But really, historically, it's still out there. The agents, when you get a job, remember the state has, the counties all have, they're making their budgets from these things. So I need my money. You're working. Well, I need to pay my rent. I don't care. I can violate you and send you to prison. So I think everybody's worried that if I take a real job, when I hustle, nobody knows how much money I have. When I have a real paycheck, and there's no laws that you take, I've seen agents take the whole check. Now, again, that doesn't happen anymore. These are the old days. But, it's still, the fear is there, especially if you were violated and been back in prison for 4 or 5 years, you're coming home to Marion County, you don't know what's changed yet. And you're just distrustful of a system that's trapped you.
That's fascinating. So when we talk about recidivism, just briefly, so it's possible that I, as a formerly incarcerated person, could be sent back, not for committing a crime, not for being arrested for a crime or being convicted of a crime, is because I didn't follow the rules, or someone determined I did not follow the rules of my release.
It could be, we have people that are not allowed, have to get permission to go to their mailbox. They have to get permission. We had to go, this is a recent one. We had a person that had no-go zones. One of them was the Burger King on 10th Street. And he's on this big crew, right? We got these big contracts with the city to clean up the accounts. So he went to Burger King and his ankle bracelet, he's in a no-go zone. So he got violated. Now, we got him out, right? That's the changes that have happened. There's some better leadership and thinking that we ever had. But, he freaked out. And I remember the Burger King manager over there, wow, you mean I could lose 17 people? Because we had 17 people in the vehicle that had stopped there for lunch, and we had one guy that had the no-go zone. And wow, I said, yeah, you need to call your state rep or your state senator and say, this is impacting my business. But, it can be simple. And often the people have committed a serious crime. Often these are, I beat up my girlfriend, or, you've had these things where you're not allowed to go. So I don't want the public to think everybody's just innocent, because they have committed crimes. But we've got to figure out how to make it easier to work, and why we really created RecycleForce. So you could have a place where you could work. And if you had to leave and go to your probation meeting, or your parole officer comes on site, you have to be drug dropped, because they'll come, so you can go to my bathroom and pee in a cup. And so we don't take people off the clock. If you were working, if Mason Manufacturing had hired you, and most employers aren't set up to do this, you would say, oh, even if you're a good employee, well, you go downtown, and then you may go downtown and take 2 hours, and they're backed up at the offices there. And so the employers go, I can't do this. It's too hard. But there's a period of time where it begins a lesson. So the courts and, the oversight, they're watching you. And if you can exhibit good behavior, work, be responsible, we go back to court. We now have court liaisons that are in the court for these hearings. Your Honor, can we take off this ankle bracelet? Or can we change his restrictions? And we win board, and we lose by far. And that because the judges now know who we are.
Gotcha. So last year, RecycleForce moved its operations from an industrial area by the 6570 North Split, about 2 miles to the east, to 816 North German Drive. Do I have that right?
Well, I never knew how far it was, but yeah, I guess you're probably about right.
I Googled it.
Yeah, it's probably about 2 miles. Yeah, we're at the side of the old RCA plant.
Okay, so the facility is a little more than 100,000 square feet. It was built specifically for RecycleForce. That was a custom job on the site of the former RCA manufacturing plant. What was the cost of the project?
It's a new market tax credit project. It's $13 million. New markets are complicated. I hope there's some economic development people listening to me here today. It's way too complicated.
I invite anyone to go online with a couple of extra hours and try to figure out how this program works.
How do market tax credits? Yeah. No, so it's a $13 million deal, but it's fun. It's important for us as a nonprofit business. Nobody really understands very well what we do. So we probably couldn't have gotten funding, or we couldn't have got this level of funding. We would have probably been what I call a pole barn somewhere without this. So we're in a facility that'll last. It'll be here 50 years from now.
So you're able to get a loan or loans, designed specifically for not-for-profits in kind of low-income areas.
And the goal is to create employment. This is the big thing it's the most important part of these loans is to create employment for marginalized people. In our case, these are people coming home immediately from prison and jail. There's probably 80 to 100,000 felons in Marion County today, but many of them have been home a long time. We're really focused on those that come home today. There's probably 12,000 people in Marion County today that have been released in the last 6 months. Remember, the public, 96% of the people that go to prison come home, often in 2 years or less. So it's a cycle. And now we're at a place where we have a permanent home. We can do a lot more than we've ever been able to do. We still got a lot of work to do. There's road issues and stuff we got to do, but we're working on them.
What does the new facility allow you to do that you couldn't do before, or allows you to do more of what you did before?
Recycling is a bulky operation. When you bring in stuff, it takes up a lot of space. And so it's going to allow us to bring in more material that we can then process down. I mean, you're limited by what you can get in and process and then store what you're going to get out. So that's maybe first and foremost. I now have better dock access. I have different areas that we can segregate different projects. One of my colleagues, Daniel Rowe, is in Ames, Iowa today. We've received a Department of Energy grant to be able to recover rare earth metals off our circuit boards. For the public that doesn't know, rare earth is what makes it's all in this equipment we're looking at here now. And China's controlled those markets for a long time. The CHIPS Act that got passed is really designed, how can we begin, because we're not mining a lot for rare earth yet, how can we recover what we have? And we've done lots of experiments trying to get the circuit, the little nodules off. We had the Japanese National Security Agency visit us, and they asked us, we had guys with pliers, how fast we could pull it off, right? And the guy would just boop, boop, boop. And they came back a few weeks later, and we had gotten about 400 pounds. I was just so proud of the guy, how far they were. And I remember the guys go, we were hoping for something close to 40,000. So what this new technology that comes out of Purdue, we worked with the TAP program before. One of these Purdue folks has now developed this new technology. The CHIPS Act and the Department of Energy has awarded them the grant with us as a partner. That equipment's going to ride in our office, and it's got a non-acid process to remove those rare earth metals off. So now I can bring in more material, because remember, the board is this little piece. So now I got the space to bring in lots more material.
So you were leaving some material on the table, as it were.
Oh, God, you have no idea the amount of projects. Like right now, Styrofoam, we have projects with Warp Speed. Remember COVID?
Oh, sure.
Project Warp Speed. And they had all these Styrofoam coolers to get the viruses everywhere. And we've got a Styrofoam machine now that we got through a grant with IDEM that is better, but the contracts they have would swamp me. I mean, I'd literally drown in Styrofoam, and then to process it down to these little cubes, it's just not enough space, and the economics of it make no sense. But those are the type of things we even can't do in this new facility. But now bringing in, like we just recycled, I say what I'm allowed to say with my non-disclosure. We have the glucose meters, and there were close to 1 million of them recalled. And, we sit in the Silicon Valley of logistics here in central Indiana. So when products are recalled or they don't sell and they have to come off the shelf, there are certain ones that we can take, right? In the old days, we were limited by, okay, we got to get this off. You're going to have 45 semis show up, and can you take it? We go, no. So now we're going to be able to take more of these projects. So it'll be really, really interesting as We're starting to talk to some of the automobile manufacturers about some of their robotic equipment. We're starting to get that coming in. But, it's just so much material. Now we can bring in a lot more at once.
And what about employment? How does that change? How many folks are working for you? Really,
the business is driven by the grants. I mean, we're funded by the federal government. And, I'm in my federal audit right now. And, we just processed through. We've been awarded about $25 million federal grant dollars over the last, 5-6 years. And this past fiscal year, we just did $6 million. And we have to go through the federal audits to prove what we do. But it's really because we use subsidized employment. So we call the model ABC. Any job, which is the subsidized period. B is the better job. This city has been wonderful and of how they're working with the Department of Public Works, the Parks Department, keep Indianapolis beautiful. God bless Jeremy. And the things there as they begin to expand wage paying. So you have a better job where you're still close enough that we can help manage the criminal justice mandates if they're still there. The judge may say, hey, you can travel, but not out of Marion County. Right? Those are the things happen. And then the C is the permanent job. So that A portion is subsidized employment. Those are the federal grants. So we've been very good. I mean, Senator Young, Senator Braun, Congressman Carson, Congressman Sparks have been very, very supportive. We have to be vetted, right, to be able to get these grants. But we've been very supportive. And we've been, I think, relatively successful. And so it's really the wages are driven by what does a grant require us to do? How much training does the worker have to be involved with versus the work? And so we got these ways we calculate that.
So it's a little more complicated than like truck brings in stuff, the dock. You have enough room for 200 people, so you hire 200 people.
Yeah, we're not
and then
like
they
that.
do that. This is a lot more complicated.
If you're a regular business, you come in and look at me. In fact, I've had some friends that come in, you ain't doing this right. You could be making money. But then if you're a workforce development, which is sort of where I come from really, you look at it, oh my God, there's too much work, right? So it's really this balance of my wife and I we're mom and dads. Like, your child's at home and he needs to learn how to work, and how tough are you versus how much more time do you get people to develop. But the grants describe what that is. Like this Department of Energy is going to have a training component that we're working with Ivy Tech now to design. So how long will that take? I don't know yet. That's what we're working on.
But I would assume that in a larger facility, your ceiling for workers is higher?
Not really workers. We would reduce projects to get the workers. We've been trying to serve 300 to 400 to 500 people. I mean, technically, we sort of will be up to 600. We probably will. But it's really, the grants allow us to we can now do more work. We can do more detailed work. We can get people to feel better. When a mayor comes to see us or the council comes in to see us, you're doing important work for our city. All this recycling, they just came in from the recycling bin, and you guys are sorting it. It's important for our city. And so it just allows our people to feel better instead of sitting in a classroom. Typical workforce development, you're in a classroom, you're trying to learn how to work, work through a book. And most of the people we serve are contextual. And you have to have some book work. You have to understand OSHA and regulations, but you learn how to work contextually, probably like all of us did. And so we're just trying to find that balance, between those two things.
So how many do you have right now?
I have 194 people that we gave a check to I'll give a check tomorrow.
Now, are these people these are formerly incarcerated people?
Every single person.
But you also have a full-time permanent workforce.
We have full-time staff. I think we have 32 or 33 permanent staff. And we will sometimes hire. In fact, we'll often hire. My goal is that eventually everybody that I hire permanently, they become the case managers, the people who recycle. They are the people that came off our floor.
Do you have any idea of how many people you have employed?
At RecycleForce, narrowed part with the federal government, we're approaching 4,000 people, that alone.
Just through the RecycleForce work?
Just through the RecycleForce work.
About 4,000 people.
Yeah, for the last. RecycleForce really started in 2004. When things changed and how the federal government contracts came in, welfare to work. There was a big change with IBM and how we changed welfare to work. And I remember my wife saying, you need to go do something else. And we always struggled. We were, in those days, we were trying to work with the other employers. A good example, Host Marriott hired lots of people from us. Between 96 and 9/11, if you'd gone out to the airport, went to Cinnabon McDonald's, it was one of our people. We had a really good program out there. But 9/11 happened. and everything changed. I can remember we had contracts at the athletic club. We were working with people down at Columbia Club and everything, and they're going to put anthrax in my food. So that fear just took off. And then, of course, TSA regs. And so that was the big change where, we were probably doing even more because we could get out. When we came to Indianapolis in 96, the unemployment rate in Indianapolis was under 1%. And welfare reform happened. There was this idea to try to help these folks get work. But as fast as we could employ them, we'd watch them disappear through these TRVs.
Through the violations.
Right?
They would send them back.
And like you say, why isn't Bob here? Oh, he got picked up on a... And where you think it's bad for a minute, and then I'll say, wait a minute, he didn't do anything. Wow, he hadn't even got his first check yet. I haven't given his check. We used to try to pay weekly to try to keep I do hold back now as we got so many people. But in the early days, we almost went to work today, paid today, so people could have the money to be able to pay the fees and fines.
Gotcha.
Right? For a long time, we paid you the week of, but it just became too hard. You had too many people. It's hard to close your payroll all the time.
Any idea, just RecycleForce, how many pounds of electronic waste?
Well over 10 million. Yeah, I know that one. Well over. We argue about that number a lot, right? But it's well over 10 million pounds.
Okay, let's take a quick break so we can hear from our sponsor. This is the IBJ Podcast.
Taft, today's modern law firm. With more than 800 attorneys in 8 primary Midwest markets and the District of Columbia, we provide solutions to the business issues facing middle market and emerging companies alike. We do this through a highly collaborative and inclusive team approach. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
All right, we're back with this week's edition of the IBJ Podcast and our chat with Gregg Keesling, founder and president of RecycleForce. So I think you mentioned to me before that RecycleForce was paying like $11,000 a month for your lease in the prior location. Yes. And now you own the location, but you have...
Well, we don't technically... This is what the complications of new market tax credits.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so there's a 501c2 that is the technical owner of the building. And then we lease from them. And we have to do that for, we're already in the deal for a while, but we got, I think, 5 more years to go.
It's like a lease to own situation.
Well, we have to refinance. So, the new markets are so for the capital gains taxes to be, utilized by the people who put up the money for these tax credits. So it's a 7 year. It's too complicated for it to explain here, but it's 7 years. When you hit the 7th year, then you can refinance, and we'll be at a market rate. We'll just have to go out. So then we will be the 501c2 will probably go away. I think they'd like to go away now, right?
But in the meantime, your cost of being in the building is...
It's going to... I'm up to $50,000 plus just for the rent. We're new in the building, so we're still figuring out how AES and electric bills and gas bills and snow removal and all these things. So we're still gauging. But no, we've had a huge, it will be a huge uptick in our infrastructure cost.
So it almost quadruples. Are you set to handle that?
Well, I'm very confident we could. It just comes down to what do we do for people, right? Because there are often people in our program, when their subsidized period ends, they're not ready, or even, in winter, I'm in winter now, there's not as much work that the city has that we can get people out. So I have to keep people unsubsidized. So it just is my heartbreak, when I have to pay more rent, I have to say, you got to go home. Or, we're trying to get people jobs, right? That's what we do, right? But, if you've got still wearing your ankle bracelet and, I'm out of my subsidized period, we have to pay. So it just comes down to, do I pay the rent and make certain the tax credit people get their money and they're all happy, which I've got to do, versus trying to help. And so those are terrible choices that I make. And then the other part you should really point out, we have the Lilly Endowment has been extraordinary. Right? The endowment, in the early years, this was a population I don't think they looked at strongly. I mean, I think everybody cares, but they're there. They're looking at violence reduction. So they've helped us now to extend people. So those were in the end of some of the grants we've got from them. That's allowed us to keep these people longer. which buys that time to, often, you'll get hired by a job, but you can't start for 4 more weeks, right? Or 2 weeks, whatever the case may be. And that person's living paycheck to paycheck. We can get it. So a little bit of that is happening. And then we've got other philanthropic support. The Clues Fund, the Indianapolis Foundation will provide smaller grants that help maybe offset the cost of a case manager or those type of activities.
So when you're asking for money, people inevitably are going to ask you, does this program really work? And prove it. So does this program reduce recidivism?
Yes. Obviously, right? But it's more than a yes. I'm a big believer in bringing science into this work. And the only way you can do that is through the scientific method. You have to have a treatment group and a control group. So we've pulled off one random control trial so far in my history. And that random control trial showed over 30 months, the people we served made almost $6,000 more money. They had almost 8% less violent crime, which is murder, bad stuff, right? We're not talking petty crime, not the TRVs. They were actually arrested more than the treatment group because they had income. And these are the early days, back this period from 12 to 18. This has helped us change it, right? Because we were able to show, you're just picking this guy up because you want the money. And then we'd have to, you're taking the federal dollars and monetizing them into the system, right? So it helped us change a lot. But this random control trial, several sites across the country that got involved in this, from San Francisco to Syracuse to Atlanta and us and Milwaukee, many other places too. And we were the only group that had a big enough return on investment to warrant a really detailed ROI on us. And when they got into the ROI, the federal government had given us all each about $7,800 per person. But because we're generating revenue, the evaluators and the researchers of the program, I fought with them for a long time. We have to put in your revenue. I go, why? Right? The way I want to say it, the federal government gives me $1 and I generate another $1 over here. But in a way, they were correct, because he said if Congress sees this, Congress is going to go, wow, 78. No, they have to understand what you're doing, because nobody really understands employment social enterprise and that. So anyway, we had this big random control trial. It's worked. Every meeting I have with the Lilly Endowment or the IU Health Foundation people or anybody that'll listen to me, we need to fund more research.
So there are some people who get enrolled in the program who do end up committing crimes and end up getting...
God, yeah. I'm not perfect.
Yeah, right.
Right. I could do what we all do of those who complete my program, right? So if you commit a crime, I just wouldn't count you in my numbers, right? But we don't do that. We are really trying to look at this like, anybody would have to, for almost any, even if you've got a product you're going to put out there, you got to test it. You can't, say, oh, it works. Trust me.
I want to dig back into your past a little bit, because your path to starting RecycleForce was pretty unusual. You grew up in Winchester, Indiana,
yeah.
Which is just east of Muncie.
Just east of Muncie. I like to say north of Richmond, but in the I'm a direct descendant, the Quaker country. I'm a direct descendant of Jeremiah Cox, who got a land grant, actually for George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, to come after the Treaty of Greenville to settle Indiana in 1802. So I'm like an old-time Quaker, Eastern Indiana person.
Tell me a little bit about your parents real quick.
My father was a high school football coach. That's how we started. My dad was a football coach and teacher, and then moved in and eventually became a superintendent in administration, and was superintendent of 2 school corporations, Randolph County. And then my mother went on this, kind of path of spiritual awakening, I guess you would call it. We had to learn how to meditate and mindfulness, and we followed Yogananda and the Maharishi, and she became a health food guru and a massage therapist. And when I left for Jamaica, I'll jump ahead, but I remember when my parents had to fight the battle of zoning in Winchester, it was kind of, we don't do that kind of rubbing of people in this. But by the end, my mother had almost every single resident, the 5,000, I think she had like 3,400 clients. So the whole town became a spirit. So I've had a kind of unusual, I don't know if it's that unusual. We're having 60s. I think we all went through a little bit of this stuff. So
you went to Winchester High School?
I went to Winchester High School.
When you were 16, you became part of a marijuana selling organization.
I suppose. Certainly, when we grew up, you couldn't find, marijuana was hard to find. So if you pulled together with your friends and you figured out how to buy some, you'd split it up. And then, of course, now we have 4 more friends. And, So I don't want to think I'm Scarface or anything here.
No, it's okay.
But but it's, I'm not embarrassed about it. I mean, my dad's passed, and I know he didn't like to hear about it. It troubled him a lot. I understand marijuana a little bit.
Okay. What was your role exactly? Your part in this?
I would say every one of us who went to high school in my time, I don't know your time too, but there was always a group of guys who would go out and try to find weed, right? And so in my day, it would be, to get a quarter pound and to have 4 guys split an ounce. Then it moved from a pound and have 4 guys get a quarter pound and that kind of stuff. So to say I'm the leader is probably not true because none of us were the leaders.
I'm sorry. I'm referring to an article that you pointed me to that said that you actually would drive down
Florida. I would drive down to the northern part of Florida and load up
where you
weed.
Apparently had contacts.
Well, I had people up here. There were a lot of older people that would hire people like me to pay me $5 a pound and throw some weed in the back of my dad's day. Yeah.
Okay. So this wasn't just for your operation. This was for other people.
No. I would get often if you got paid in with a pound of weed, like hallelujah. I got weed to smoke for a while, right?
Okay, so you would take the family station wagon down to Florida.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Buy the stuff.
Well, I didn't buy anything, right? All I'm doing, I'm supposed to drive here. Somebody will meet me. I mean, to this day, it's just amazing. How did I find these people? How did you know what we were doing? Right? And in hindsight, like, how did this happen? You'd show up and there'd be some, you Greg? Yeah, that's me. All right, pull your car up here. And so we throw it, and I bring it back to.
Oh, so you're delivering.
I'm delivering, and then I would get paid.
Right, you're UPS in this situation.
Yeah, in those days, it was $5. $5
a pound.
$5 a pound.
How many pounds could you get in your car?
Oh, I don't want to go. Think of the old Rambler station wagon, and you remember they had those folding seats in the back, right? And how you could open them.
Did you ever get caught?
Well, technically yes, but that's a complicated story. I don't know. If we got time, I'll try to go through it.
That's okay.
Yeah, but technically, no.
And your folks never caught on?
I think, my parents had some idea what was happening.
Okay.
Before my dad died, he's not about to die, but you did it, didn't you? I go, a tiny bit, Dad.
Okay.
And so
but you did this for years.
I did it from 16 until I went to Jamaica for this, right? It's about a 10-year period of my life that I post every single morning I woke up, I was thinking, okay, what am I going to do today?
What are you going to do as in, how am I going to move
How am I going to
marijuana?
figure out how, to find weed to smoke? Because basically it was finding weed to smoke.
So wait, let's back up real quick. So you went to Earlham, but you dropped out.
Oh, I barely, that's the family story. My dad said I was there 6 days. I lasted 6 weeks. But I wasn't Earlham very long because I'm in high school in my sophomore year. And I had a High Times magazine. It's my favorite story. High Times magazine.
Were they publishing back then? It was 70.
This is 74. This is 1974.
Okay.
Yeah. It came out even before that. 73, I think it started.
Okay.
But I'm in like the 4th edition. The Rolling Stones took domicile in Jamaica when they were escaping taxes from, and they linked with Island Records. So this story about the Stones being there. And in that story, Bob Marley's not that famous yet. He's famous in Jamaica, but most of us have very little understanding of it. And so there's a story, and Bob is saying, I'm smoking a pound a week. And I thought, God, where can you find a pound a week? Right?
Wait, this is a story in Rolling Stone.
So no, a story in High Times.
Oh, in High Times.
In High Times. If I said Rolling Stone, I apologize.
Sorry, and Bob Marley is saying that.
Bob Marley, and it's the Rolling Stones.
Right, I'm sorry.
Keith Richards and Mick Jagger are talking about going to Negril, this town that I ended up going to, where they could find because they asked Bob, where's the best weed? Well, it's Negril. And so when I got there, so I decided I need to find myself, Dad, and I'm going to be responsible, and I'm leaving Earlham. And
that was the cover story?
It was, I sold it really well. We had a college fund. When I grew up, I had to cut, we had this big kind of farm, and we grew vegetables, and, we were kind of this, even though my parents would die, they never called themselves hippies. We were kind of living that kind of hippie life in a way, because my mom is, we're doing spiritualism and we're growing our holistic food. We chop firewood. There was the great oil crisis, where we couldn't get gas and gasoline lines, and so we chopped wood and all that. So every dollar I put in, my dad would match it. And so I had a nice little hunk of money, not a lot, but enough. And he said, you go to college. I said, Dad, I'm going to make a deal with you. if I go, I get to control, because his name was on the account. He goes, I get to control the money. He goes, well, I think I can trust. So he took it. And so that's the part I think he got most upset with. I took the money
Gotcha.
and I went to Jamaica and I bought a piece of land.
So you drop out of Earlham, go to Jamaica, because you thought you would be doing what?
I was going for the golden age of marijuana. I really thought this will be exciting, right? First, I'm just sort of going. I mean, you could tell Negril was starting to grow as a little tourism market. Bob Seger went there. Bob Skaggs, I actually got to know about. Bill Murray was there. You would see that clientele. If you just go there, you walk down the street, hi, Bill.
Yeah.
Right? So it was so small. I mean, the whole population of the people where my wife's from was maybe 3,000 to 4,000 people. There wasn't electricity in the area that I came to until 1979. And so it was just this sort of hippie hangout. And so when I got there, I thought, God, and I met this Jamaican guy. Because really, I went there first, and he said, hey, I can get you land. And so I went back and got the money out of the bank and flew down to Jamaica. And there was a woman who had, her husband was a tax collector. And she had inherited from his death 36 acres of land. And it had to be developed. And we had to bring in electricity and water and sidewalks and all this. And this was the launch of the Caribbean Basin Initiative by then President Ronald Reagan, as we were trying to bring democracy. Michael Manley been our socialist leader, and we're trying to change. So this man, his name is Mancy Black. He's passed, but he's a just tremendous man. And so there was $3,000, I guess I could say about $3,000. And so he said, we're going to go buy land. So we went to this lady. And we'd walk, and he'd take a stone. We're going to take from that tree. And he'd throw the stone and hit it. And she'd go, aye, to that tree. And he marked him out with his stones, right? And we're walking. Every time the woman said, aye, right? And then when we're done, he says, now give her the $3,000. So I said, okay. And I gave her the $3,000. And I sit there going, wow, what have I just done? Right? We had no title, no agreement. But what she ended up doing, because she trusted Manzi, and here you've brought in this white man. The Caribbean Basin Initiative had to have an American investor. You had to have an American. And so there was the Bank of Nova Scotia, which was the bank that ended up giving us our loans. But I fit that bill. And so maybe if I'd not trusted, I was naive. I'm 23 years old. If I was not so naive, maybe I would have never pulled this off, but boy, we did. The next thing you know, we write a business plan. We go into the Bank of Nova Scotia. We present the plan, and I can write. I'm not terrible, and so I kind of put a business plan together. And I can remember the guy sitting there going, I like this. He goes, he looked right at American, 2 Jamaicans. I think we could fund this. And I literally can remember to this day holding onto the bottom of this chair going, oh my God, I'm going to get a loan. Right, and we did.
So what was the business?
A hotel.
You built a hotel?
Oh, yeah. We built a little resort called Somerset Village. So then from 83-ish there on, all of a sudden, Ambassador, George Mickelson, they were flying one-day trips down to the Holiday Inn in Montego Bay. And somehow there was Amber Vacations, I'm going to forget names, but I met this person and said, I'm a Hoosier. Could you come down? And so all of a sudden, people started coming. I hosted my vice principal from high school who married the guidance counselor. I had, and the other thing I did, when I married my wife, I became a Rotarian. I changed. I cut my hair. I was Mr. Button Up. And so we're all of a sudden bringing, my dad's proud as could be, right? Because I go from this guy to this. We did. It's called Somerset Village. We had all these charters. Eventually, Apple Vacations, Funjet Vacations, Sunburst Holidays out of Boston, New York, all of a sudden found there was still a market for hippies that had gotten jobs and grown up a little bit. And we exploded. We became this, there's no all-inclusive hotels yet. There's not a sewer line. We ended up passing a code in our time. I became chairman of the Hotel Association in my region because I went from being the guy that got one of the first Caribbean Basin Initiative loans. I married the local girl. I became a Rotarian. I went from what I went to try to do to be kind of a marijuana or ganja guy to a businessman. So that's the point of the story. I started here in America, and I went to Jamaica to think that's what I would do. Instead, I became a businessman and developed a hotel and became, this guy and we were on top of the world. It was 1995. So I became the head of my Rotary Club. Out of all the Rotary clubs in the world, Indianapolis, we just got a brand new fax machine. By this time, we have electricity. And there was this fax. So when a fax would come, bookings, right? And you'd get the fax and you'd start reading it as it would come off the paper. And I saw Rotary Club of Indianapolis, Indiana. And it was Jim McClellan, who was, Governor Holcomb's. Do you know Jim?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. So it was Jim McClellan, who was the president, or about to be the president of our Rotary Club. He'd send me this email. So by the time I'm on the phone, and I call him directly, and it was expensive for me to call Jamaica, but we did it. And I said, he goes, Greg, I haven't even finished sending the fax yet. I said, you found me. I'm a Hoosier. And so I remember there was my dad, one of the retirees went to Winchester to find my dad. And I remember he called me and said, some big shots from the Rotary Club of Indianapolis came today. And I said, what for? And he goes, see if you're worthy of working with you. Better be glad you got a good dad. Right? And so we had these projects from 91 until about 95. And the other thing that's happened now, development is really starting to happen in Jamaica, the all-inclusives. Butch Stewart, who has run Sandals and came down, was really a masterful businessman. And we had got past an ordinance in our town that you couldn't build a hotel taller than the tallest coconut tree on your land. We thought that was so cool, right? We'd get the Jamaicans, we'd had this ordinance. We named ourselves the capital of casual. It's a line that's taken off. I should have trademarked it, but that's mine and just a few other people's lines that we put together. So we had this really cool market. But now the big guys come, Butch comes in and he goes, will you accept me? And I remember my wife had on this yellow dress and he goes, you've married the most beautiful yellow bird in the island, right? And I knew he was playing us, but I said, will you let me come in? Will you accept me? So they came in, but now we're gentrified. The world changes. And we're getting a different market. We're getting the all-inclusive people who are wanting a different market. Of course, the yuppies are now a little bit older too. And the moment that I knew something had to change, Jerry Springer did a live broadcast with Spring Break from the property next door to me. And we were hosting the Spring Break kids. It was just, I'm older now, so God, what would I have been by? I'm almost 40. I'm like 30, maybe 39, 38, 39 at that time. And we were also putting a sewer line. We've lobbied, I've worked with the United States, USAID, and the European Union to bring in this sewer line there. So our road is no bigger than this table, right? So we had to put this sewer line down. And so I can remember bringing guests in. It was like a Tarzan movie. We're carrying luggage on our top. We couldn't get the vans down. And I said, it's not going to be bad. And this Jerry Springer moment. And the people were just so drunk. And I go, I'm tired. And there was a Rotarian, Don Moreau, Colonel Don Moreau, whose son is Bill Moreau, who was Bill's mother, or Don's wife, had just passed. And he was there. And he really I love that man too. There's another great man in my life that changed me dramatically. And I remember my wife said, what could we do for a year or two if we went back? The markets are changing. The sewer line's got to get in. Let's see if we can go do something. And I remember Don looked at my wife and said, Clinton's going to sign that welfare reform law. Your husband could do this. And I flew back and forth and met with Don. And at that time, I think he was the head of the state fair for Governor Bai at the time, but then Governor O'Bannon. And he took me around and just introduced me. He'd always say, he's going to help change our workforce. And I would shake people's hands thinking, and I remember this moment. I am. I'll never forget that. And so we came back, still think we'd only be here a few years. And, just like we did try to go back in 07 or 08 when the economy collapsed. But my life changed I think that's the thing of the story. And it's how I want my people to get this chance too. I was this young man who for a good 8, 9, 10 years of my life, fancied myself, I'm not a little small-time guy, right? But I fancy myself that I can do something. And I finally just go to Jamaica and think I'm going to become the king of the world. Instead, I became a businessman, cut my hair, got loans, changed my life dramatically. I can remember that, God, I don't hardly smoke any weed at all anymore. Right? I can't. I gotta work. I have loan payments to make. I got reports to file, right? So that's the story that I think inspires what we do today, is that people can change. And it needs a Don Moreau or a Mickey Mauer or people like this who come in and just sort of look at you and go, I have confidence in you. That's what we're trying to do with the folks we're serving. I know you did something. I trust you, man. I know you can do this. You can go recover rare earth and help lower our dependence upon China. You can do it. And you're like, for real? Yeah, you can do it. And I think that's the gist of our model, what we do, and what has happened in my life. That somebody believed in me. I've never gone to college. I don't think it's worthwhile for most people, myself. I don't have any debt. It is this thing that's important for all of us to trust. The people we look at, we don't understand, we don't know them. I have no idea, what people are even saying and talking about, but you trusted, and that trust worked out well.
My thanks again to Gregg Keesling. I very reluctantly left out a significant portion of our interview that dealt with the death of Gregg's son, Chancellor, who took his own life while serving in the Army Reserve. However, there's a documentary about Keesling's efforts to educate government officials and the public about the enormity of the problems of suicide in the military. It's called Self-Sacrifice, A Son, a Soldier, a Suicide, and it can be found on YouTube or through PBS. And folks, before you get on with the rest of your week, there are a few stories in the latest issue of IBJ that I want to bring to your attention. First up, as the Indiana Economic Development Corp faces a steady stream of calls from critics for more transparency, state lawmakers from both political parties have filed legislation aimed at requiring the Job Creation Agency to disclose more about its activities. Peter Blanchard has more on the increased scrutiny. Also in this week's paper, Daniel Bradley chronicles a day in the life of Noblesville Mayor Craig Jensen as he exercises his high-touch, radically transparent, and 16-hour-per-day approach to governing. And Dave Lindquist previews the tech and entertainment hub to be called Black Future House that will be featured during NBA All-Star Weekend in Indianapolis. And again, you can find these stories in the latest print edition of IBJ or online at IBJ.com. And thanks for making time this week for the IBJ podcast. I'm Mason King. Hang in there, everybody. We'll be back again next week.